Welcome, everyone, to the ADS Dental Transitions webinar. Is this a bad time to buy a dental practice? And this is presented by Christine Elliott and Earl Douglas. We will have question time at the end of the webinar, so if you can hold your questions till that point. And now, you're up.
Great. Thank you so much, Melanie. And thank you to everybody that joined today. We hope we can give you some insight of buying a practice during buying a practice during bad times. And is it really a bad time? Again, my name is Christine Elliott, and we have Dr. Earl Douglas with us as well. And Earl has 40 plus years in transition, so he has a lot of experience and that he can share with us today as well. So what exactly are bad times? I mean, there's no question that people know what bad times, there's good times, and there are definitely some times that are better to buy a dental practice than other times. But one of the key points that we would like to get through to you today is that whether it's a good time or a bad time, during the bad times, buying your own dental practice or owning your own dental practice will invariably outperform any alternatives that you may have during these times. So we're going to discuss this during this presentation and hope that we can tell the difference between good times, bad times, practice ownership, and what can happen during bad times.
Well, Christy, I don't think there's a better option for a hardworking dentist. And I put those words hardworking dentist in there because to be the most successful practice owner you can be, it does take hard work, but it pays off so much more than any other place where a dentist can apply themselves. I mean, let's think about it. Bad times. Who wants bad times? Nobody, but they're here. They come, they go, they come back. When Doug Johnson bought my practice back in 1982, I said, Doug, now when things get bad, don't get upset. They'll get better. And Doug, when things get good, don't get excited. They'll get worse. And that's been happening for the last 41 years. But just think about it. If you're a dentist and you're working for somebody and things slow down, like in Raleigh back in, I guess it was 1987, and a young lady said, well, this is not a good time to buy a practice. Things are bad. Maybe I should stay on as an associate instead of buying. And this was what I told her. I said, well, if things get bad, who's the first to get fired? She said, I will. And I said, and if you buy this practice and the seller works for you and things get bad, who's going to get fired? She will. I'll buy it. Because she realized good times, bad times, your best option is ownership and control. And back in the COVID period, I wondered what would happen. But the funny thing was, there was kind of a run on practices. A lot of people were tired of the uncertainty, tired of being at effect instead of at cause, and decided, I've got 8 years of my life and $1 million tied up in this dental license. Maybe I should have control and make this thing pay. So there you have it. Good times, bad times, either one's the best time to be an owner.
And Earl, with your experience that you have, I'd love to hear about an experience of what you thought was one of the worst times that you had one of your clients buy.
Well, that probably was September 11th, 2001. A lot of people might not remember that. That's, I think we're in a new generation here. I have to keep reminding myself. But up until September 10th of 2001, the day we closed on a sale of a practice in New Orleans, nobody had a hint of what the next day would hold. And it was a bear. It was probably the biggest catastrophe of a lot of people's generation. And the fellow who bought the practice, I'm thinking, oh my goodness, what are we going to do now? There's no slipsies, no takebacks, no reset button there. It was his practice. But here's what happened. The stock market kind of crashed, the economy crumbled. The country was just totally confused. We've never been attacked on our soil before. And it was a slow start, But if he had not bought the practice, he might have been fired from a job. So better a slow start than no start. Better a job than no job. So to his credit, he did his best, hung in there, and as all bad times, it passed. And now he's in a very successful practice, doing very well. And it wouldn't have happened had he not gone into it in the worst of times, which he was still better off with his ownership than any other option he had. So that's probably the worst one.
And if you're not going to have practice ownership and decide to own your practice when bad times do come, let's talk about some of the alternatives that you're going to do to get through the bad times. I mean, some of my favorite options, I think, to get through bad times is to sit back on the couch, watch Judge Judy, my dirty little secret of daytime drama that I actually love. You can sit back and watch Days of Our Lives. I think this show's been on since before I was born. So that's at least a year's worth of binge watching for Days of Our Lives. So, or you can go work for somebody else. Obviously, you'd have to hope that there's enough work available to work for somebody else. If we're talking about bad times and they've had to cut back, then you may want to wonder and worry whether or not there's going to be any work available for you. So some of the alternatives may look fun if you're into daytime drama, but obviously owning your own practice during bad times gives you a little more control over what you're going to do through the bad times. So.
Well, if you do buy a practice in the worst of times, your schedule might be a little slower. But there's a funny thing. I tell people, what do you think the optimum time for booking ahead is? And I'm talking theoretically, not reality here. I don't much care for reality. It gets in the way of a lot of good fantasy. But anyway, if you were to work a schedule, how far ahead should you ideally be booked? And my answer is 1 hour. People say 1 hour, that's terrible. I said, no, it means that you are keeping up with the demand, that nobody puts their money back in their pocket at the end of the day because you said we're closing. You got the most productivity out of that day. And if you do book ahead just 1 hour, you will never run out of work. You always have 1 more hour of work. So be careful if a schedule gets out there 3 weeks, you're telling 100 people, put your money in your pocket, we're closing the store, versus finding a way to accommodate the demand. So if you do buy a practice in quote unquote bad times, you could expect your schedule to be cut back. So maybe you're only scheduled 1.5 weeks instead of 2.5 weeks. You're still busy every hour of every day. So that's not really such a frightening prospect, I don't think.
And I know a lot of times when you have buyers and they think bad times are coming, they're already nervous about having loan payments. They already have their student loan debt that they're worried about. And now they have this big loan that they just took out from a lender to buy this practice. And I have to say, what we've seen But with lenders during the bad times, even during, extraordinary bad times, that they're very gracious. Lenders actually step up during these times. And what's great is they do this not out of the kindness of their heart, even though they are very nice and we know a lot of them personally. So, but they're not doing this out of the kindness of their own hearts, but they're doing it because they know the dental industry is one of the strongest industries that will bounce back. There's been good times, bad times. The dental industry has always come back, if not the same, better during bad times. So they've always stepped up and helped those that are willing to take on the risk. They're willing to work hard to get through bad times, work together with the lenders, and they really do make it easy for the owner to get through these bad times together. So the last thing in the world a lender wants to do is take a practice back. So that doesn't benefit anybody. So we have seen in the past and recently, because we've recently gone through a bad time with COVID, we saw the lenders step up and really put in place a lot of programs to help these dental owners get through this bad time and have options available to them. So the lenders really do come together and support their owners during these times.
And yeah, the lenders are smart people. They know what's over the hill. If we're in a bad time, they know it'll pass. So many times, many of us, myself, maybe, yeah, me, think bad times are here. They're never going away, but they do. And the smart money bets on a successful future. But you're right, foreclosure is the worst thing for a lender. They will do anything to avoid that, and they will work hard to make somebody succeed. It is important, though, that the guy out there in the trenches is, number one, listening to good advice, not just being headstrong and rebellious and thinking that they have the answers to everything, but there is expert advice that can help them maximize their experience. And foreclosures, by the way, if you wonder about buying a practice, is that a really risky thing? Well, all the lenders we talked to and just talked to 3 or 4 of them at a meeting 2 weeks ago, they all pretty much concur. Their default rate is about 1/3 of 1%. Well, what does that tell you? Their non-default rate is 99.7%. So if somebody does go out on that limb to own a practice, you probably got a 99.7% chance of success, as long as you stay away from the 3 Ds: divorce, drugs, and depression. Absent those things, success rate is so high it isn't funny. And if you worry about real risk, keep this in mind. If somebody doesn't succeed as an owner, working for themselves, getting the benefits, the success of their own labor, would they succeed as an associate, where their job is to make someone else's practice bigger, someone else's profit higher? So something about ownership, that the rewards come to you and the penalty comes to you. And we have the control to make sure it's a reward.
Right. And so let's talk about one of the bad times that we just went through with COVID. So we can talk about some real time and real life stories during COVID. During this time, like Earl mentioned earlier, we actually saw an increase in practice purchases from before or after COVID. So dentists and people were buying and transactions were happening during COVID. These dentists that did this, they're the ones that know that if they can make it during a bad time, they can definitely make it during a good time. And they knew that owning a practice was absolutely their best option. And I think one thing to take away from this is that the lenders were lending during COVID. Practices were closed down, but yet there were still transitions done, transactions closed. So the lenders were actually lending during this time. So if that doesn't show you the kind of sorry, if that doesn't tell you how much the lenders believe in the dental industry, nothing will, because this really happened during COVID. Rates were great, but everything was shut down, very bad times. And so owning a practice during this time, these were the dentists that knew that there was no better option to control their career, control their future, even during a bad time. And if they knew they made it through the bad times, what were the good times going to be? Those were going to be even better. So, Earl, can you tell us a little bit about a buyer that actually bought during COVID?
Boy, can I. There was one experience that, I'm a positive person. I'm a very positive person. I'm a very optimistic person. I bought some green bananas today. I was so proud of myself. But boy, I'll take my hat off to a client I had who bought a practice in the middle of COVID. Well, I thought it was a wonderful idea. Not everybody shared my opinion, but he bought a practice that was doing 90,000 a month, which is pretty good, really good. And I was hoping through my tracking of his metrics that we would, not drop too much. Well, things went a little awry. His office manager went to lunch the first day on the job and never came back. That sounds like a pretty bad thing, but in this case, it was a blessing. He had to hire somebody else, somebody who took their job seriously. He had to replace all the equipment in the office because the duct tape only has a certain shelf life. Even the Gorilla duct tape, it won't last forever. Don't trust it. So here he is. Whoa. Staff problems. He replaced the whole staff and upfit all the office and equipment. So when he called me up 6 months later, you would have thought he was going to teach me some new cuss words. But he says, Earl, I replaced the whole staff, the whole office. And this month, we collected $240,000 in COVID tainted money, by the way. But you know what? That COVID tainted money spends just as well as any other money. So he was very happy, even notwithstanding the misadventures that weren't even a setback to him. So there you go. We never know. But like some philosopher said, it pays to be an optimist. It's better than your options.
And Earl, because you have the experience you have, I really want to tap into it today. And let's go back even further. And let's go back and talk about when the very worst time was that you saw for buying dental practices.
Oh, you want to go into the vault, huh?
Yes, let's go into the vault.
Let's go into the vault and see what's way back there. Look back there, I can see it.
Yeah.
When I first got into the transition business, here's how bad things were. When you got a loan to put a down payment on a practice, the interest rates were 15%. Now, I know everybody whines and cries because now they're expected to pay 5.5%, perhaps 6%. This is ruinous, right? But back in the beginning of my transitions, everybody paid 15%. And you know what? Everybody succeeded. Because, when you stop and think about it, interest is just 15% of the loan and it's tax deductible. And Uncle Sam's paying 6% of it for you. And it comes out to a rounding error. So the hype about interest is undeserved. Okay, now imagine this. You think that's bad. We didn't have computers in our offices. We had a thing called a pegboard. Oh, this was high tech because you could write on this paper and it would transfer to the paper under it. And it was amazing. That is the extent of our record keeping. I charged you $30 for a filling. That's right, $30. How will I ever afford that? Kids are going without shoes today. And you paid me $20. There's $10 on your account, and we kept up with it all to the penny. But can you imagine today's buyers without 50 pounds of paper, computer reports, analyzing the molecular structure of the dust under the dental chair, which is a very critical factor in analyzing a practice? No computer reports, no computer. Here's a pegboard. Look, I charged this, I got paid that, had a good year. Oh, and there were no consultants back then. People had not figured they could charge a dentist to give them expertise, or in some cases, inexpertise. I did speak with one dentist in South Georgia who hired the wrong consultant. As a result, he bankrupted, lost his practice, and lost his home. So sometimes expertise takes judging. Don't take bad advice. It's very, very costly. But we didn't have people who knew what they were doing, who could tell you how to do what you're doing. So those were pretty bad times. And guess what? It wasn't a time that came or went. That's just how it was across the board. We didn't have practice acquisition lenders then. You had to go down to this thing called a bank. Some of you might remember the concept. They took some bricks, they took some mortar, they built this beautiful building, and you should have seen the signs out there. And the toasters, when you open an account, you got a toaster to toast your bread. And the loan officer didn't know anything about dentistry, except he did hear somewhere it wasn't a good idea. And it was a little challenging, a little challenging. I remember one instance in New Orleans where back in the day, the lenders did not lend you all the money. They lent you maybe 20% and the seller had to finance the rest. Well, this one seller, he decided he didn't want this buyer owing him money. So after the sale, he took the buyer to his bank and he says, "Hi, it's Doc so-and-so. I've been banking here for 40 years. And this is Doc so-and-him, and he's going to be doing the next 40. But he owes me $80,000. And I would like you to give him a loan for that. And to show my good faith, I will co-sign and guarantee the loan. Oh, and to show further good faith, I will take that $80,000 and let you hold it as collateral." And I'm not kidding you, this is true. The bank said no, 100% collateral is not enough. So anybody who whines and cries about our dental lenders now who throw money away like confetti should have been around to see how hard it was in the day. That's what old people say about the past in the day, that heck, we've got a dream scenario now. And we didn't have lawyers who knew anything about dental contracts. They knew how to buy that tract of land over there. They could tear off a sheet and you sign here. But dentistry, we didn't have experts with accountants or attorneys. So those were some tough times, even though it wasn't bad times, it's just how it was across the board. And back then, everybody succeeded. And if they didn't, it wasn't the practice's fault, it was their own fault. And if they were smart, they would take some good advice and turn it around. And if they weren't, well, it wasn't a happy ending. So there's some bad times, and we all made it because, as I've said, and I'm a dentist, I can point a finger in my eye if I want to. Dentistry is such a good profession that even us dentists can do well in it.
I think it's pretty amazing too, that even back then with those impossible obstacles, that it still had a success rate of 95%. So the dental industry has been strong from the very beginning. So let's talk about things that we've gone over so far and consider all the advantages that today's practice buyers and practice owners have. As we talked about earlier, you now have dental software. Now, this software holds a lot of information in it, and it can make every report you could ever possibly want and give you more information than you even know what to do with not only your dental practice, your clients, and then accessing them, but you do have reports and software available to you now. Interest rates, we were talking about interest rates, 15%. We have a long way to go before we get to a 15% interest rate. And it's tax deductible, like you said. So it's pretty much almost free source of capital with the interest going up like it is. The effect that it actually has on your monthly payments is really, when you put it in terms of how much, one extra crown you have to do or an extra filling you have to do to cover that payment, it really is a nominal issue there. So interest rates still, we're not near the 15% mark yet. So the money is still cheaper than it was to borrow for your dental practice. And again, lenders still are supporting dental borrowers. They know what a strong industry this is. So you have lenders who are willing to, not only some of them to lend on 100% of the purchase price, but give you extra money for capital to help you get through the transition period from the leaving doctor to the new buying doctor. So we have dental lenders now. And again, accountants and attorneys that specialize in this industry. It's definitely an industry that's different than all other industries when it comes to consultants. We have consultants and professional information that we can tap into to be able to be successful in owning your own business. So we've come a long way from where you started, Earl, with a 15% interest rate and no lenders and no specialty professional consultants we could tap into. So I think buying a practice these days and owning a practice these days far, far easier than it was back then.
And you know, I'm an optimist, I'm a positive person, but I always love saying the timing is always wrong, because you're always going to see an obstacle in your path, even if it's a matchstick that you have to muster up the strength and courage to try to jump over. So there's always something, and it might be however slight, and when it's slight, it looks big, and when it's big, it looks bigger. But you know what? Suck it up, buttercup is what we say. Get out there and make that 8-year, $1 million investment you made in yourself really pay off. And the only way to do it is by working for yourself and putting the profit of that practice into your pocket, not some investors. Because there's two parts to a practice net income. There's the salary the dentist gets for the work they did, and there's the profit. And that's the money the owner gets, not for lifting a finger, but just by being an owner, sitting in his lounge chair, sipping his scotch, smoking a cigar, and collecting his profit checks from a practice somewhere in the United States. Well, that should be you and not someone else. So it's always a good time to be in the best, strongest, most profitable position possible.
So again, we're going to kind of reiterate what's available these days for purchasing a practice, even during bad times. Because again, the alternatives will never outperform owning your own practice, no matter what the times are, good and bad. So again, there's access to capital. There's access to practice information from the software we talked about. We have access to consulting expertise that they keep getting better and better. The longer that we are in this industry, they just get better and better. So you have access to all kinds of experience. You have access to management consulting. If managing a practice isn't your strong point, if you're not a business person, but you're a dentist that does great work, there's management companies out there that can help manage the day-to-day business opportunities and still make your practice extremely profitable. You have access to marketing consultants. If marketing is not your forte, you have all this stuff available to you today to help you in the areas that you may feel like you don't have the experience or the expertise. You're a great dentist, and that's the first stepping point, is being the dentist, a hard-working dentist. You have access to other means for things that you feel weak at. And again, you have the experience of legal and accounting help. So we've seen the worst times to buy practice, but still practice ownership is absolutely your best option. Good times, bad times. And with all this available to you, people and lenders are basically screaming at you, take ownership of your profession, take ownership of your career, take ownership of your future. So it's never been easier to own a practice, whether you consider yourself going through good times or you consider it being a bad time.
Well, that's right. And it's a perspective, isn't it? It's just, how's it look from where I sit? But associate dentists earn about 1/2 the percentage of the work they do compared to an owner. They don't get to create their practice culture. They might have a culture they don't like, but there's no changing it. They might be working 50% more hours than an associate. So lots of good reasons other than the profit motive, the high success rate, the satisfaction of being a true professional who owns their profession and not a worker in a business. So lots of reasons for you to own a practice. And I don't care if it's a bad time, buy one now before they're all gone. So there you have it. All the boats float on the same tide. When the tide goes up, they all go up. When it goes down, they all go down. We all pretty much endure things. We're enduring people. We get through them. So if it's a bad time, remember Earl saying, if it's a bad time, don't get upset, it'll get better. But if it's a good time, don't get excited, it'll get worse. But then it'll get better, and then it'll get worse. So tough times don't last, but tough people do. And if you made it through dental school, you're a tough person.
Yeah, so if you're waiting for the perfect time to buy a practice, you may be waiting for a very, very long time. You may also be waiting for that perfect time to buy a computer, a perfect time to buy a cell phone because a sale might be coming along. So if you're waiting for the perfect time, take a step back and realize that that perfect time may never come. So whether it's a good time or whether it's bad times, practice ownership will definitely be your best alternative to control your career and control your future.
Now, I don't know how it could be possible to have a question after that wonderful presentation. But if you do, we're here to answer them. Let's see, I guess we should look in the Q&A, right? There's a Q&A box down there.
So I see no one yet. Any questions? You could also use the emoji reaction. Put your hand up.
I told you it was a wonderful presentation. How could there be a question?
Okay, well, apparently Christine and Earl did such a fabulous job. No questions. We want to thank you again very much for attending, and thank you so much, Christine and Earl, for all your expertise in this great topic. This presentation is recorded and will be sent out to all of you, and for those who did not attend, within the next week. Oh, I do see one question. Let me check. Who are dental lenders? Awesome question.
Good question. There are a number of dental lenders. Bank of America has been doing this probably the longest, and they are a very strong ally for you. Provide is a very strong ally for dentists. They've created a computerized application process that for, some dentist computers are easier to work with than paper. And then there is the Huntington Bank that is a very strong player. There is PNC Bank, and there are some regional banks. There's First Citizens in the Southeast. Of course, they're in a lot of places, and we're seeing more and more banks create their dental lending arm. And the nice thing about these dental lending arms, as in Bank of America, you're not getting a loan from Bank of America, you're getting a loan from Bank of America Practice Solutions. And as such, they're not subject to all the bank requirements because it's more of a finance company than it is a bank that's trying to turn down loans. So there's about 5 or 6 good ones to start with. Hope that helps.
Yeah, I really appreciate everybody signing on, and hopefully we were able to give some good information and help somebody get over that little bit of fear of purchasing a practice.
Okay, thank you again. Have a great rest of your day, morning, evening. And I think we're signing off. Take care, everyone.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye.